I'm going to give you 13 tips that'll help with joining your first game jam, as well as my framework on how I approach game jams coming up. What's up, guys? My name is Tim Roswick, and if you're new here, I want you to consider subscribing because we post daily game development content just like this on the channel. And while I'm talking, why don't you go ahead and leave your top game jam tip down below so all the rest of us can learn from it as well. So real quick, if you don't know what a game jam is, basically it's where developers get together and they make a game in a very short period of time. Sometimes it's 48 hours, sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's longer. And the goal is to just create a game as quickly as possible and publish it by the end. Sometimes there's a competition out of it, sometimes there's judging, but regardless of all that, it's always a ton of fun and you end up with a finished game at the end. So it's definitely worth it. Now, I've joined a ton of game jams. I can't even keep track of how many game jams I've joined. So I've had a lot of experiences where my games did not go as planned, where the jam just threw something at me that I was not expecting. And what I realized was, I needed some kind of framework. I need some kind of thing to keep myself in check to actually finish games. So the way I approach this now is like on a weekend game jam, for example. It starts on Friday night and it goes Saturday and Sunday and then submission. I focus completely on the idea on Friday. I try and get a good core idea down on day one. In those first couple hours, within a couple hours, I try and get the core idea done. I try and get the core prototype done. I try and get it done as quickly as possible so I can test it, so I can show it to people, so I can figure out whether or not it's fun. And then day two, which is usually Saturday on a weekend game jam, I will try my best to get the whole thing built. I need to have 100% of the game done on Saturday so that on Sunday I can go ahead and start polishing and messing with stuff and tweaking stuff and adding little details that really count. The way that I set this up is usually prevents me from not finishing games. It usually prevents me from overscoping. It usually prevents me from, falling into some of the pitfalls that a lot of game developers do. So if I have the idea on a Friday, I build the whole thing on a Saturday, and then I spend Sunday polishing and working on all the stuff. And as well as the publishing materials, right? Because you need like a title image, you need like a logo for your game, you need to set up the page with all the controls, you need to do menu screens, you need to do, like there's a lot of little details like that you got to work on Sunday. So if I can get the core game done on Saturday, I know I can do all that on a Sunday. That's kind of my framework. I know Rami from Vlambeer has a similar framework that he calls 444. And basically he says that you should spend 4 hours building your game and 44 hours polishing. That didn't work for me because I feel like sometimes I just can't even get my idea out in 4 hours. But it seems to work for other people. And I know that might work better for people that maybe don't know how to scope as well and they may get lost in the idea. So keeping it to something that you can get done in 4 hours might be a better alternative. So tip number one is prepare early. So a lot of people join game jams and the theme will get announced and then they'll realize, oh my God, I'm not prepared in the slightest. I need this engine. I need this framework. I need to download a bunch of stuff. I need to find a team. I need to set up Discord or Skype or whatever we're going to use to communicate with my team. We need a Trello board. We need all this. Yo, you got to have all that stuff done before the jam even starts. You want to spend the jam time on the jam. You don't want to worry about all that different stuff. So if you're going to have a team, figure out a team. If you're going to communicate with the team, figure out how you're going to do that. Have all your software set up, have all your hardware set up, have a folder on your desktop with all the stuff you need to do. Like get everything ready so that you can actually make a damn game. This also includes stuff like food or drinks or anything you're going to have around, lighting, internet, like everything that you need to exist for the 48 hours you should put into consideration and prepare early. So tip number two is take advantage of the rules. A lot of people disregard a lot of the different rules on different game jams. Every game jam has its own set of rules, and sometimes you're allowed to do things, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're allowed to use pre-existing assets, sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're allowed to use stuff that's freely available on the internet, sometimes you're allowed to use paid stuff, and so on and so forth. So if you are, you don't want to spend a lot of time reinventing that stuff, especially if you're a solo developer. If you're working alone, especially, you want to make sure that you use as much stuff as possible, right? Like you don't want to just spend all your time making art if you're not good at art and you're good at programming, and you can just find some online. And that's what a game jam is about. It's about the quickest, fastest way to make a game that's fun. It's not so much about all the different intricacies of all the different skill sets. So if you're in a game jam and you don't have some of the skills required, and there are rules that allow you to use other stuff, use other stuff. If there are rules that allow you to buy stuff, buy stuff. You know, just go with the flow, don't stress about it, and just take advantage of whatever rules are there. Tip number 3, start microscopic. I would say start small, but you gotta start microscopic. Whatever you think is small, cut that in half and start with that. And the way that I do this is I will constantly de-scope over the time that I have. So if I start, for example, with a game idea and it takes me 2 or 3 hours to build and I don't like it, I have to either go with that idea and cut it in half, or go with a different idea that's even smaller. Like the point is to make sure you de-scope every time if you're starting with different ideas or you're prototyping different ideas. Don't scope up, because then you'll get lost in a whirlwind of no finishing games. Tip number 4, use what you know well. So a lot of people like to use game jams as an excuse to try out a different engine or mess with different things or learn different things. I don't think game jams are good for that. I think while there definitely is that pressure to get stuff done and it can kind of motivate you to work really hard on something, I don't think a game jam is the time for you to learn a tool or learn how to make art or learn how to make music. These are skills that you want to come into the game jam with already. And now it's not saying you can't practice or hone your skill during a game jam. It definitely helps. But if you don't know the software, you're going to spend more time trying to figure out how to do something than what to actually do. Once you figure out what you want to do, you want to be able to execute quickly, because otherwise it's going to be really hard for you to finish a game. Tip number 5, build quick and dirty. So this is a tip that I definitely would say is one of my top tips, because for a long time I would stress over the code base that I was writing. I would want to write perfect code. I would want to make sure the code was reusable. If I made art assets, I wanted to make sure that they were perfect and pretty. And I would get stuck in that perfectionism loop, and I would tweak and I would tweak and I would tweak. And before I know it, I would be making this whole game and I would spend 6 hours on one little character when the game was supposed to have 10 characters, and like, yo, there's no time for that. You can't do that. You gotta completely dismiss your perfectionism. It's not saying you can't make high quality stuff, but you gotta know the time limit that you have for each piece, whether it's the coding or the art or the music or whatever. You gotta have time limits on stuff. And there are some points where you just have to say, I can't spend any more time on this. We have to go with it. It's good enough. Tip number 6, get feedback early. So this is something that I started doing on stream kind of by accident, and I've realized that it's been a super valuable aspect to my game development and game jams. So I would stream on Fridays, and if a theme got released for Ludum Dare or something like that, I would totally start making, and then I would let all the people on stream play my game, and then they would give me feedback and I could iterate rapidly. And I realized that by showing people and getting feedback really super early, it helps you hone your design. Like, there's a lot of stuff you're not thinking about when it comes to other players. And this applies to game design in general, but like, when people play your game, you'll learn stuff that you never thought you would learn. You just see things you never thought you would see. And it's super, super important to kind of find those things. If you don't have like a stream audience or anything like that, you can join our Discord. We have plenty of people. We have an entire channel dedicated just to feedback, and as well as game jams. So you can go ahead and post in there and people would be happy to give you feedback, I'm sure. Tip number 7, don't wait on teammates. So when I've joined teams in the past, a lot of people like to wait for stuff. And I don't really know why this is, but there's like something about human nature where the programmer wants to wait for the art assets to program it all and make it all happen. Or the artist wants to wait for the, implementation or the specs for the art. And while yes, you should have general communication between artists and programmers and musicians and all that stuff, and your whole team should communicate and everybody should know what they're doing and when, but nobody should be waiting around for the other persons to get their work done. You want to make sure that you're working, if you're programming, you want to make sure that you're working with placeholders. If you're doing art, you want to make sure that you're, thinking ahead and trying to put stuff in at the proper time. If you're making music, you want to, try and watch everybody and get a good sense of what's going on and where the music's going to fit and how long it needs to be and all that stuff. There's no time to wait around. So if you're waiting around, you're doing it wrong. Tip number 8, don't skimp on the audio. So audio is one of those things that like is severely underrated, especially in game jams. There are so many games from game jams that I've played that do not have any audio, and I am definitely guilty of this as well. There's so many game jams where I've made and I've completely forgot about the audio, which is the music or the sound effects. But those things add so much. They're so important to the polish process. And if the rules allow and you're allowed to use external music or sound files, they're not that hard to find. You can go to various websites like freesound.org or opengameart.org. Stuff like that can give you lots of stuff that you can download and use, and you should use it. If your theme doesn't allow for it, then obviously it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But even with a microphone and Audacity, which is a free software, you can make some pretty decent sound effects. You can also use software like bfxr.net, and there are plenty of tools out there to help you with audio. Music is a little bit more difficult, but there are definitely programs to do that too, right? But it is super important, and it should not be forgotten because it makes such a big impact on the likability and the polish of your game in the end. And I don't think it's something you should forget. Tip number 9, focus on what you're good at. So if you're a solo developer and you've got to take on all these roles, right? Let's say you're really good at programming, but you're not so great at art. You want to probably focus on a programming heavy game, right? If you're a really good artist and you're not that great at programming, probably want to focus on a programming light game, something that really uses your art skills and showcases the art in the world, but doesn't require a ton of programming. If you're a musician, you want to do the same thing with music or audio in some way. Think about what you're good at and try and make a game that is really good at those skill sets, that really showcases what you're best at. Don't try and even out the things that you're not good at, because that's just going to end up, it's going to feel mushy and it's going to feel like it doesn't fit. And if you're really good at something, you want to make that stand out. You want to build the game around that skill because it's going to make for a better game. Tip number 10, plan for the worst. So many things happen during a game jam. So many things can go wrong. The idea that you thought was perfect was going to be 10 times harder than you thought it was to make. You're going to have to refactor some stuff. You're going to have to change the movement system late in design. Like, things are going to go crazy, right? Shit's going to happen. You got to be prepared for it, and you got to plan for it. That's why I kind of talked about my framework, why I like to have the basic idea done first day. I like to have the game done second day and polish the third day, because it kind of allows for a lot of those things to happen. It's so general and it's so vague where I can kind of adapt where I need to adapt. And if you've got the basic prototype down on day 1, day 2 is like building and bug fixing, right? So like you have a lot of time to fix all those different bugs, and it can really, really help when you're trying to push the game out there and get everything ready and complete, because there are just so many things that can go wrong, and you just want to keep that in mind. Don't get discouraged, don't get stressed, don't get overwhelmed. Things are going to go wrong. They always go wrong, but just try and fix them in a timely manner. And sometimes bugs can end up as features, you know? Sometimes that happens. And if that's the case, just roll with it. Don't get too obsessed about it. Just keep on moving forward. Tip number 11, eat and sleep. So this sounds like a weird tip. What is this doing in game jam tips? Well, there are plenty of people that definitely don't plan on sleeping, but a lot of people forget to eat. There's been plenty of streams and game jams where I've completely forgotten to eat or sleep. There's been plenty of game jams where like I planned to stay up all night and just not sleep at all. And it really messes with you, especially when you get a little bit older. Like it can throw off your whole system. If you miss meals or you miss sleep, you can get low on creativity. You can get low on energy. You can get irritable. You can get mean. You can just stop being productive. There's so many things that can go wrong by just missing basic things. So it kind of ties into preparation. Be prepared, have stuff around. Sometimes you can pre-cook meals. Sometimes you can have, your favorite drink ready to go. Just kind of have stuff around. Prepare sleeping schedules. Like the past couple game jams that I've done, I've actually had a full night's rest every night, because I feel like I'm just more productive by losing 8 hours every day. It still makes me more productive than working through those hours because of the productivity loss from the lack of sleep. And the more that I do it, the more that I just see that it's so important. So don't lose too much sleep. Don't get too crazy, but really, take care of yourself during this epic, crazy time. Tip number 12, make it easy to play. So this is a huge mistake that I see a lot of game developers make, especially when it comes to game jams, is they will make a game like an Android game, or they'll make a game like for Linux, or they'll make you download an installer. And what you need to understand about game jams, right, is that like a lot of people are playing your game specifically because you entered the game jam, because they did too. That's usually what the audience is for game jam games. So with that in mind, you want to make your game as easy to play as possible. The best possible version that you can publish for a game jam is a web version, something that they can click on and play right there in their browser. If you can do that, like, they're in your game, right? They're playing your game, one click away, boom. Every step that they have to take beyond that reduces the likelihood that they're going to play your game, and it reduces the amount of time that they play your game as well. If I have to take out my phone and download an Android app or whatever, that takes longer than clicking on a web link, right? If I have to download your game, yeah, a lot of people still play downloaded games, but they're less likely to do that than click on a web game. If they have to install your game, like, people are even less likely to do that, right? So when I play games, I actually have a rule, and I say no installers on stream. I just can't stand it. I don't like people installing a bunch of stuff on my computer, especially when you could have just published a web game if you're working with Uni or something like that. So make it easy to play. Really keep in mind that people are going to be coming to a web page, they're going to click on your game, and then they want to play right there. They want to play it quickly. You want to get them into it quickly, or they're going to lose interest. And so making it easy to play is super important. And tip number 13, the last tip, don't quit. The finish rates for game jams are really low sometimes, and it breaks my heart because, like, I do not want people to quit game jams. I think there's so many great games that are started but never finish, and I feel like we need more of those great games in the world. If you're discouraged or you start something too big or stuff like that happens, like, I get it. Shit goes wrong. Crazy things happen, but you should always focus on finishing. You should always try and publish something. You should always push yourself to make it happen. Even if you get discouraged, even if you get overwhelmed, even if you bite off more than you could chew, you should always focus on that finish line, focus on actually putting something up there. Even if it's like a tech demo, even if it doesn't really make sense as a game, try and publish something, because then the next time, if you're focused on the same thing, you're going to get better at it, and you get better at what you do a lot. So if you finish, you're at least psychologically saying that, hey, I'm a finisher, I'm going to finish things, and you're not losing any of that like brain power to just quitting, because quitting doesn't get you anywhere. Quitting means that all your effort is wasted. Quitting means that that file is going to sit on your hard drive and nobody's going to get to see it. So no matter what, seriously, finish your games, finish your game jam games, publish them, even if you don't think they're finished. Nobody ever really considers their game finished, especially in a game jam. Okay, so you're not alone in that, but just publish anyway. That's the real secret to a good game jam game, is just finishing, just pushing something out there. And then you can say, hey, I finished a game. I'm an actual game developer. So that's all I got for you. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please leave me a thumbs up and a comment down below. If you want more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and the bell to make sure you get notified. And if you're doing a Ludum Dare or something like that, chances are I'm probably doing it too. So look out for me streaming the game jam process. It'd be awesome to hang out with you. So once again, my name is Tim Ruswick, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Finish your damn games. Finish them. You think I'm joking? I'm not joking. Finish your